The Bear season one premiered in the summer of last year. All episodes were made available at the same time, and most of them were made available instantly on Hulu as well. And it pretty much became sort of an overnight phenomenon, an overnight sensation. Many people just discovered the show due to the word of mouth nature of it. I think many people saw the conversations that were happening on Twitter or Instagram or wherever else and decided, let's check this out because this is a new series and it starred mostly unknowns. There was only really one person a part of that first season who people might have recognized, and that was John Bernthal, who was not even necessarily a main character. He was sort of a character that loomed in the background. But again, it became one of the best reviewed series of 2022, and it was one of the most celebrated series of last year. I know it ended up in both of our top 10 list of last year as well. And so very much was excited and eager to check out season two of The Bear, and also equally as excited that they decided to drop all the episodes once again at once. But this time they expanded from 8 to 10 episodes with season two. And there's also quite a few new guest stars who popped up in this brand new season of The Bear, largely probably due to the fact that season one was so well received. But with all of that out the way, I will pass it over to you, man. What do you think so far about what you've seen out of The Bear season two?
What a, I think, good work of character driven stories and development, man. It's something about The Bear that other TV shows I feel like really just aren't doing right now. I think a lot of other TV shows harp on the skeptical of what the show is supposed to be, or they harp on the or other shows harp on what I don't know, just too much of the bigger picture of what they're supposed to be. But The Bear is so amazingly character driven, and they give each of their characters something to do and to chew on. One of my favorite anime right now is called Haiku. It's literally a volleyball anime. And what makes it so good is the realism in which characters progress in that anime. And what makes The Bear so good is I feel like they're giving that same attention to detail to their characters. I feel like every character has very clearly a problem they're presented with. You know what they're good at, you know what they're bad at, and the show takes the time to say, okay, let's show you their story and what they're doing next. Right? I absolutely love that about the show. Very simple example is there's almost a whole episode, at least a good chunk of an episode dedicated to Marcus, right? Where he's trying to learn desserts overseas somewhere. And you're just like, well, yeah, of course he would do that. And it's not like everybody's getting better or made to get better for some random reason. It's like, no, we're trying to make this a fine dining establishment. How do we take our employees that we have now and elevate them? And I love that as a device to move this season forward. It just makes sense, and it feels good when you're watching it because we have bought into these characters. We are rooting for these characters. We're rooting for the restaurant that we want this restaurant to be. And so every episode, you're like, what's going to happen? And what I like about it is I feel like it's moving in real time. And when I say that, I mean, like, I don't feel like we're rushing anything. I don't feel like we're moving too fast. I don't feel like we blinked and now the restaurant is up and running. You know what I mean? And you're just like, dang, we're cruising on this thing. Instead, they're like, no, we're going to take you down the path. We need you to be patient and to show every character how they're going to get better in every small step, how their relationships are with each other, how their relationships are with mothers and fathers and significant others and potential love interests. I just really like the patience that The Bear has, man, and the way that it treats its characters. It just feels, again, different than a lot of the other shows that we have. A lot of the other shows are great, don't get me wrong. I love those other shows, but again, a lot of them are harping on the spectacle of the show, the reason you're supposed to be afraid, not necessarily the reason in which you're supposed to root for a lot of the characters in The Bear. You're rooting for like everybody in the show, and I really like that. It really feels it feels good. I don't know, because I think we've all been in the places of the characters in The Bear. We've all been somewhere where we all need to grow for some reason, or we love something and we're like, let's take this to the next level. What does that look like? It's not going to be as easy as you think it is. And so, man, The Bear, the writing is tremendous. I love the acting is tremendous. I know The Bear, I don't need y'all to understand. She's one of my favorites right now, easily. And I don't know what it is about her, but she's a really good actress and she brings a lot of heart to all of the roles she's been playing recently. And I'm excited to see any and everything that she does, man. But this cast has just been fire. They really took season one and they said, okay, let's up it a little bit. Let's take these characters and be intentional about them. Let's be mean. Let's have a meaningful conversation between the story of this, man. So I think it's great. I think I can't wait to see more of the Bear Man, but I think they're doing a tremendous job. And I think already, again, right now in the back of my head, I think it's just going to make my top 10 again. That's how much I'm enjoying myself. But we'll have to see. But for now, man, the Bear, they're doing it.
It's a fantastic show, really in all regards. That first season was just such an explosive season of television, and watching it, it often felt like they were having a war amongst the characters within the kitchen. You know, that was kind of just like the whole tone and thematic sort of premise of the first season. Everybody was just sort of battling each other. A lot of the characters didn't trust each other. All of that had to be established with just all of the dialogue and interactions that we saw. This one, to sort of, expand on your point about everybody going off to hone their craft, become even better, it reminded me of like a sports drama, like a team that comes together that's trying to like figure out the best way to win. And so they have to go increase and elevate their skills. And as you said, there's a lot of standalone episodes with Marcus and even with others later on in the season with Richie as well, probably in my favorite episode of the season in episode 7. But you have a lot of these characters who have to just go off and learn these new skills to become even better cooks, better chefs than they originally were, because now the stakes have risen. They have to make sure that everything that they deliver is going to be of A+ quality because they can't afford anything else. Like, this is all of their livelihoods on the line. So you certainly get those stakes that are maintained throughout the season. And really what I even love more is the fact that, yes, Jeremy Allen White is the main character, and we do continue to follow him, and just like how he has grown and developed as a character, and we start to see him sort of mature and become more of the leader in this space as well, but also know how to concede power when necessary. But we get to see all the exploration, really come to life with many of these other characters, and you get to see those supporting players really step up and do a lot of work and get to know more about them, where they come from, why they are the way that they are, and it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper into the characters here and just their relationships with each other. And I think that all of that stuff is just done so in such an incredible way, because the writing here is just it's so flawless that there's many scenes I'm watching the show where I don't even feel like people are acting. I'm just like watching them have conversations. And oftentimes they're really long takes, or there's these extreme close-ups to really illustrate and enunciate how their emotions are coming across in that particular moment. And I just don't feel like I'm actually watching actors. It feels like I'm watching real people, and I'm just seeing how their relationships unfold. So this was another spectacular season of television. I think that it's certainly on par with the first season, but what I do love the most about it is how different it feels. It doesn't just try to replicate the success or the tone of what they did in season 1. It goes for a whole different aesthetic, even though it's within the confines of this really high pressure situation, this high pressure restaurant world, and the culinary arts. Like, all of that stuff has so much behind it, and so many detractors and so many critics and cynicism that are, sort of really infused within the show. It still takes a different approach and explores the characters in a new way. I do want to just talk about quickly sort of the additions to this season of The Bear. And so if you don't want to know anything about the show, if you don't want to be spoiled by any appearances or guest stars, I would encourage you to, maybe hold off on the rest of this conversation and come back later. But because of the success of season 1, I think a lot of actors were like, well, damn, we want to be a part of that. We want to come play with the Bear and be a part of this cast. And I think the standout episode of this season is episode 6, which is essentially a Christmas episode. It's entitled Fishes, and it brings in just a litany of heavyweights from across the both TV and cinematic worlds. You have Sarah Paulson coming in here. You have Bob Odenkirk, Jamie Lee Curtis pops up, John Mulaney. Like, there's just so much incredible talent. And that's just within that episode. There are also other people that pop up throughout the season as well. But what did you think when you first turned on that episode and you just saw all of these really incredibly talented people making up the rest of the Brasato family, because they're all essentially extended members? You have Jamie Lee Curtis portraying Donna, his, Carmi's mother. So she's the matriarch of the family. You have Bob Odenkirk. He's an uncle. Sarah Paulson is like a cousin, and they're all just so different from each other, but they come in, and I think as actors, they sort of portray the people and the characteristics that we would expect them to, just based off of their previous work. What did you think about just seeing all of them pop up here?
Yeah, it's also wild because this episode, though The Bear is normally known to be a very chaotic show, especially when they're in the kitchen, this season kind of hadn't been like that up until this episode. At least that's what it felt like to me, because this episode is chaotic. chaotic. I mean, there's no chance to breathe in this episode, y'all. Like when you're watching it, you're like the dialogue is fast, the camera's cutting places. It is really insane, but it's to simulate Christmas with this family and how crazy it really is over there and how big this family is. And so when I'm watching that episode, it probably wasn't in like 10 minutes into you like, is that Bob Odenkirk? I said, wait a second, what's going on here? And then maybe like a minute, 2 minutes later, it's Jamie Lee Curtis popping up. And I was like, okay, what are we really doing here? Like you said, Sarah Paulson pops up. And it was wild to kind of see in that fast pace for that to happen. Because I feel like a lot of times when there's a TV show and they cameo somebody, they want you to kind of focus on the cameo sometimes. So it tends to be a slower pace episode or something. But here it was like, nope, fast motion, boom, 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 one after another. So it was kind of crazy to see, but it was also, I think, a reflection of how, like you said, how good the season 1 of The Bear was. These actors just aren't hopping on this TV show because they needed work. You know what I'm saying? These are legends. They don't need to be here. It's because they want to be here. And I think they understand and see The Bear as something not only different, but something that they wanted to be a part of, man. So I absolutely loved it. I probably one of my favorite episodes of the season so far because of the fast pace for sure. But also I love it, feels like a milestone to me. It feels like The Bear, this episode was like, oh no, The Bear's here. The Bear's here to be established. And now, and people need to be talking about it because people do talk about The Bear, but it's not a big skeptical to me as I feel like that it should be sometimes, you know what I'm saying? Because it is on FX, maybe because of the nature of the show. It is a cooking show with, again, what originally was smaller actors and actresses on it. But now this again felt like a milestone. It felt like, oh yeah, The Bear is here to stay. And I'm pretty excited to be a fan of the show.
Yeah, every like 2 to 3 minutes when somebody new would pop up on screen, I'm like, wait, what the hell? Like, what? Sarah Paulson, what are you doing here? Bob Odenkirk, what are you doing here? Like, what's going on here? So it was shocking, and it took me a while to adjust. And I got to admit, I was somewhat skeptical because once I saw like all the players that were involved, I'm like, well, is this going to distract me for the rest of the episode? That I'm just like kind of in awe that they were able to assemble, these really talented actors and actresses. But slowly but surely you just fall back into what you would expect out of the show, just the character driven dynamics between everybody. And ultimately this episode is so successful for a couple of reasons. One, I think you just dive deeper into establishing this family and just the chaotic dynamics between them and the damaged nature of a lot of these family members. And you see like why people are the way that they are. You can kind of see why Carmy is the way that he is. You can see why, his older brother, eventually was just like in this really dark place and how he ended up at the way he ended up with the opening of season 1 and the fact that he committed suicide later on. Like you just kind of see like the seeds that are planted here for a lot of that stuff. And of course, like they were established well before this particular Christmas episode, but we go back enough time where I think you can kind of see just like where everything was sort of a turning point really for Carmy and just like what led him down the path that it ultimately led him to. And the second reason is the fact that because it takes place at Christmas, it just subverts all your expectations for what a Christmas episode should be. Like this is probably the worst Christmas that a family could have. It's not celebratory. It's not great. People end off the episode very much upset, pissed at each other. You get this huge conflict that happens by the end of the episode between Jon Bernthal and Bob Odenkirk, and you just expect something to explode, and eventually it does. And it's like, oh my goodness, like this family is really broken, really damaged, and you got Sarah Paulson off on the side who is like carefree, and she's like, yeah, this is kind of why you need to get away from these motherfuckers because they're nuts, like they're crazy. Exactly. You won't be able to thrive and do well here. And so by the end of it, it's like, wow, that was just such an emotionally heavy, intense episode. And that's what The Bear does so successfully. It gives you all of those really emotionally tense episodes that just have your hair standing on the back of your neck because you feel so anxious. You feel so worried about what's going to happen. And you're just like waiting to see, oh, is somebody going to really like just blow up here? And eventually that's typically what ends up happening. And so I just love that they were able to, at least for one episode, kind of lean into that. And there's other moments throughout the season where they start to like play with that idea. But again, like the rest of the season just does an extraordinary job at balancing that tone. They don't always focus on that. Sometimes they do have those slower moments that just breathe and you just watch people talk and you get to know each other. And I'm like, oh yeah, they can play all sides of this well. It's not just a comedy. It's not just like this high stakes, high tension drama. Like they can really tap into so many different genres and tones and styles. That's just what makes it, really one of I think the best episodes, or excuse me, the best TV shows right now on air. So it's definitely an incredible watch for sure. And I would recommend people check it out. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on season 2 of The Bear. If you checked out the drama on FX, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.